It's only natural for any game series to change over time, but just because something added to a formula is new, doesn't necessarily mean it'll sit right with longtime fans of the series. And I don't think anybody knows that better than Paper Mario fans.
As early as the third entry in the series, each game has been wildly different from the last in ways that many core fans would argue is not for the best. It seems like with every new Paper Mario game, the discontentment and frustration of the community grows significantly, and the discourse surrounding the series reaches unimaginable highs. But to me, it feels like those days are nearly behind us.
Hey, what's up, it's your boy Rock. Today, I'd like to tell you the story of how the remaster of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door has instilled an excitement and optimism for the series within me that I have never quite felt before. Paper Mario has become a painful series to discuss online, regardless of any nuance or individuality you may present as to why you do or don't like certain games in the series. You're always categorized as either a modern Paper Mario fan or a Thousand Year Door fan, and each side of this discussion are at each other's throats constantly. Civil discussion does not exist with this series, and hasn't existed in what feels like forever. But why exactly is that? Well, I think many people would argue that the discourse surrounding the Paper Mario series began to turn sour around 2012, with the release of Paper Mario Sticker Star. This game was divisive, to put it lightly. And I think it's fair to say that this was where the wedge began to form in the Paper Mario fandom. Looking at it objectively, trying to keep my feelings at bay here, I don't want to start any arguments. Sticker Star was a very different game than what fans had come to expect of the series. The main way in which this is the case is in its lack of real story, something that the previous games prided themselves on. Interesting and engaging plots were the lifeblood of this series, but Sticker Star chose to dial back that aspect of the games to near enough nothing in exchange for a focus on paper. Of course, the extremely unique RPG gameplay is also an incredibly important part of the first two games, something which Sticker Star actually captured better than the third game, Super Paper Mario. But what Super Paper Mario will always have over Sticker Star is that the gameplay is, well, to enter feelings territory for just a sec, fun, enjoyable. It offers anything of substance. As someone studying game development, I have a solid argument as to why Paper Mario Sticker Star, and to a lesser extent the two games that follow it, are objectively bad, with poor design decisions aplenty. And this is where the big divide in this fandom starts to rear its ugly head. Most people think Sticker Star is not a very good Paper Mario game. We largely can agree on this. But with the two games that follow, it's not so cut and dry. Paper Mario Color Splash came out for the Wii U a few years after Sticker Star, and was, for all intents and purposes, a sequel to that game. Despite the massive uproar from fans and critics alike, Nintendo decided to double down on what they had with Sticker Star, and what they were met with was much of the same backlash. Paper Mario Color Splash is a massive improvement over Sticker Star, but it very much has the same DNA, and that's what many fans of the series took issue with. But you know what? Because it was better, a lot of fans also found themselves quite enjoying it. Sure, it wasn't quite what they were looking for in a new Paper Mario game, but it did the job. It was funny, had at the very least a better story, and the gameplay was less annoying? Although that really depends on who you ask. The ratio of haters to fans of Color Splash was a lot less drastic than it was with Sticker Star. And while I think fans who were outspokenly disappointed with this game were absolutely entitled to feel that way, many people began to see their criticisms as petty. The discourse surrounding the series was becoming less about Nintendo making poor decisions with their games, and more about Paper Mario fans not being able to let go of the past. So when 2020 rolled around and Nintendo released another Paper Mario game that was in essence another sequel to Sticker Star, how do you think the discussion surrounding that game and the series at large panned out? Were people having a calm, rational discussion about why they disliked or liked certain aspects of the game, both on their own and in comparison to the previous heights of the series? Nope! Not at all! Discussions surrounding Paper Mario the Origami King. Well, they weren't even discussions. The fandom had derailed into an unrelenting flame war. Because in truth, the Origami King is probably the closest we'd gotten in almost 2 decades to the traditional Paper Mario experience we had been waiting for. A lot of people were enjoying that game, and that just made the ones who didn't seem that much more entitled and naggy to the masses. The people criticizing this game were not just seen as people who played a thing and didn't like the thing that they played. They were seen as whiny old 1000-year door fans who won't shut up until they've gotten exactly what they want. It was exhausting. And that's the thing. If you'll want to prefer the original trilogy over the modern trilogy, you aren't labelled a classic Paper Mario fan, you're labelled a 1000-year door fan. That is how important this game is to the series. It stands in such stark contrast to the modern entries. To like this game is to stand in defiant contrast to everything the modern games represent. That is how big a deal Paper Mario the 1000-Year Door is to fans. Whether they wanted to admit it or not, Nintendo knew that every new Paper Mario game they released was being compared to the 1000-Year Door, because that game is simply a masterpiece. It is not without its issues, a thing that modern Paper Mario fans refuse to believe that we 1000-Year Door fans actually understand. It is not a perfect game, but it offers so much more than any of the modern games do. It's unique down to its very core. It's darker and weirder than most Nintendo games, honestly. It's funny and witty, with expertly written characters who feel real. The world this game is set in feels real, and the gameplay that ties the whole experience together is nothing short of sublime. Paper Mario the 1000-Year Door perfectly represents to me, and I'm sure many others, exactly what a Paper Mario game should strive to be. You want to know why every new Paper Mario game gets compared to the 1000-Year Door? It's because it's that damn good. But the thing with Nintendo is that they can be pretty insecure sometimes, or at least that's how they can come off. Their actions often communicate to us that they don't want us to play older games in a particular series because they're scared that we'll think that those games are better than what they're currently offering. And we see this time and time again. We kept saying how the new Paper Mario games just are not as good as the 1000-Year Door. But because Nintendo is Nintendo, we felt like we had to accept that they'd continue to ignore that game's existence, keep doubling down on what we were telling them was not working, because they couldn't possibly change course now. We all but lost hope that Paper Mario could be a series that we loved anymore. After being burned so many times, after Nintendo was repeatedly, clearly communicating to us that the Paper Mario we wanted was nothing more than a distant memory, how could we have faith that we could enjoy a new Paper Mario game? This was the moment that everything changed. This was not just a simple announcement for an old game coming to the Switch. This was a message. Nintendo was telling us that they heard us. They understood us. With this announcement, they communicated all at once that they can see the issues we have with the modern games. They can see just how much the Thousand Year Door means to us, and how desperately we wish the series would go back to what was working so well, and that they're taking the first step in that direction. Because my friends, this was so much more than just an announcement for a Thousand Year Door remake. This was a signal, clear as can be, that Paper Mario is changing. Because, let's face it, Nintendo didn't have to do this. Sticker Star, Color Splash, and the Origami King are games that have been criticized to hell and back. And yet, all but Color Splash outsold the Thousand Year Door by a considerable amount. If Nintendo truly were to be acting purely from a business standpoint, why would they stop taking the series in the direction it was headed? People can talk shit on these new Paper Mario games until the cows come home, but at the end of the day, those games are making money. As much as we may hate to admit it, we fans of the classic style of games, we're in the minority here. Paper Mario games release in 4-year intervals, more or less. So 2024's Paper Mario slot could have easily been taken up by yet another new game in the modern style. Or if they were dead set on a remake, Sticker Star was right there. 3DS games coming to Switch is not a new or novel concept. If Nintendo was so adamant that the series would never go back to what we wanted it to be, they could have retooled Sticker Star for the Switch in a very similar fashion to the Luigi's Mansion 2 remaster. But they didn't do that. Wii U ports have been one of the single most consistent schedule fillers in the Switch's entire life. They could have, at any point, removed the touchscreen features from Color Splash and slapped it onto the Switch to sit right beside the Origami King. But they didn't. Super Paper Mario is a game that almost sits outside of the two categories the games in the series are lumped into. It is so different from any of the modern trilogy and either of the original two games that in some ways, a re-release of that game could have been the safest move for Nintendo to make, especially considering that it's the single best-selling game in the series. But they didn't do that. Nintendo chose to have their next Paper Mario release be a remake of a classic Paper Mario game. But not just any classic Paper Mario game. They chose to remake the Thousand Year Door. The one that every new game in the series is compared to relentlessly. The one that is asked about in every single interview with the series producer. The one that had an entire social media movement backed by thousands of fans that campaigned for a remake. Nintendo chose to do exactly what we asked them to do. They heard our cries. They saw the outpouring of love and fondness that so many of us hold for the Thousand Year Door, and they chose to give us exactly what we wanted. They did not do this begrudgingly. They didn't look at our outcry and think, Jesus, let's just give them the game so they can finally shut up. No. They did this because they wanted to give us what we wanted. For whatever reason, their mindset regarding this series is finally beginning to shift. They're finally starting to see that the way the series was, it was something special. It was something to be celebrated. They chose to re-release the Thousand Year Door, but they were not content with stopping there. They chose to remake the game from the ground up. They chose to keep absolutely every minuscule detail intact, every character, every quirk of a location's design, every gameplay element and story snippet. It's all here. And they chose to make this their final announcement in the final direct they held in 2023. They announced this remake in the same slot that we've historically seen reserved for Smash Brothers, The Legend of Zelda, mainline Mario, because that is how important the Thousand Year Door is to us and to this series. And Nintendo finally understands that. I have never been so confident about the future of any Nintendo series. Everything that they're doing is communicating that this is the dawn of a new era for the Paper Mario series. This series is finally getting back on track, back to what we've longed for it to be for so incredibly long now. Its future is looking brighter than ever. And Nintendo wanted us to know it. And that is enough for me. This remake and everything it stands for has given me so much hope for the future of what is one of my most treasured series. It finally feels like we can put its darkest days behind us once and for all.
Unless, of course, I were to indulge in those darkest days just one last time, to see if I can find some light in them before I bid them a final farewell.
What have I done? I don't need to introduce these games. You know the deal with these games. Opinions on the modern trilogy of Paper Mario games are completely all over the place, and a lot of people get unreasonably angry at the mere suggestion that any of these games are bad.
People also get unreasonably angry at the mere suggestion that these games are good, so neither side is innocent here. These games are divisive, which is a polite way of saying I hate them with every fibre of my being. But I decided to give them one last chance to impress me before the series moves on from this era forever.
So buckle up, because it's time to discuss
The Dark Age of Paper Mario.
Last time I discussed Paper Mario, I tried to keep my own opinions relatively at bay so as to not spark any heated discussions. But I'm just gonna make this clear right off the bat. I am going to be talking about my opinions on these games, and my opinions alone. And spoilers, not too fond of these games.
I just don't want anybody to shit their pants when I say,
Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rock. Bad!
Worst in the fucking world. I hate this game so much!
Let's establish exactly why I feel that way. I think it's important to understand that the original trilogy of Paper Mario games are some of the single best games I have ever played. They each have their issues, 64 and Super especially, but I absolutely adore these three games for a myriad of reasons. A lot of people look at people like me, the 1000-year door fans, to fuck off, and think we only dislike the modern trilogy because, well, they're different. Which is such a fucking stupid mindset. If a Paper Mario game being different was the only reason I could hate it, Super Paper Mario would not be my favourite game in the series. I'd hate it more than the modern trilogy if that were the case. So, at least for me, that argument doesn't even remotely hold water. That's just such a reductive way to dismiss valid criticisms being levied against these games. A lot of people think this whole discourse boils down to
I'm sorry that you love me. Change my mind up like a origami.
and that's just false. My disdain for these games is so much more than them not being like the games I do like. It's a matter of fundamental game design issues and an abhorrent lack of creative stimulation. A lot of this is likely down to preference, but the game design in particular is something I feel is objectively flawed, and I'd be happy to tell you why. My issues with these games boil down to three key components. resource economy, the battle system, and the incentive issue. Let's start with the battle systems, as really, the other issues with these games are largely centered around this. The more time passes, the more I realize that Sticker Star has the least offensive battle system of any of these three games. A bold claim, I realize, so let me walk you through why I believe this to be true. In Sticker Star, when you enter a battle, you're able to choose your attack from the collection of stickers you own. You can use one sticker, or pay to have a chance to use multiple stickers. You choose your sticker, do some action commands, turn over. That's it. Compare this now to Color Splash, a game with a functionally similar system, but once you've selected your cards, you then have to paint them. Then once they've been painted, you have to flick them up to the TV from the gamepad. Both of these things add a decent amount of inputs, and therefore time, to the attack phase of each battle. And don't even get me started on the Origami King. There is an entire phase of battle that takes place before you're able to actually select your attack. The ring puzzle phase, wherein you have to rearrange the board so that enemies are lined up in a way that would give you the edge when it comes to the attack stage. Does anybody else see the issue here? In the two games following Sticker Star, battles are incredibly convoluted, and each encounter can take up a big chunk of your time, especially when you consider that these things have to be done multiple times in most battles. And while Sticker Star's battle system is the least convoluted, that doesn't mean it's good. All three of these games share an issue of a pitiful lack of actual strategy. Sticker Star and Color Splash have the most issues in common, so let's start there. These games do not let you select which enemy you're using an attack on. Your attack simply hits the enemy nearest to Mario, which makes sense on paper, but what about when there are multiple enemies in a line and you have to choose 2 or 3 disposable attacks all in one go? This more often than not leads to two equally frustrating outcomes. Number 1, the attack you thought was going to defeat the first enemy does not defeat the first enemy, causing the entire rest of your strategy to fall apart, and leaving you completely powerless to do anything other than watch Mario fumble his way through the rest of the encounter. Or, number 2, you defeat the enemies way quicker and easier than you expected to, and as such, you lose the other disposable weapons you had lined up. This shouldn't annoy me. Alright? I understand that. These games absolutely shower you in stickers and cards, to the extent that you'd have to make a conscious fucking effort to run out of them. So like, losing a couple here and there, or having to use a couple more, doesn't really make that much of a difference. But it's the principle of the shitting thing. By having this system in place where the player basically has to just guess whether or not a disposable attack will defeat an enemy or not, the games actively discourage the player to think strategically and lay out any sort of battle plan. In a lot of cases, the player is punished for doing this, because, oh, the first attack finished the enemy off, so say goodbye to the others you had lined up. So if a combat system has no strategic element, why would a player want to engage with it? The only elements of strategy being employed here can be expressed by the following flowchart. Do he fly? If yes, jump. Do he spike? If yes, bonk. If neither, do whatever the fuck you want to, it doesn't matter! Visualize your shitty Paper Mario combat systems and anything else with Lucid Chart. It's just baffling. The ratio of button inputs to active brain cells required is laughable. I don't understand how these combat systems can be so shallow and devoid of any actual thought, but take so many fucking inputs to get through. So you know what? How's about we just don't? Yeah, I think I'm just gonna run from this battle, actually. Alright, yeah, I forgot. Running from battles defeats the fucking enemy! I'm gonna kick the shit out of you! Oh no! Wait, what the fuck? How the fuck did this happen? I genuinely don't understand. How did the developers put this in the game and think... Fucking nailed that one, actually. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for it. I don't want to engage with this combat system most of the time, so I'll happily take this addition. The run button just became the most important mechanic in the entire game. Good job, guys. But from a design perspective, this is genuinely dumbfounding. So, okay, you have a bare bones combat system that you have literally framed the entire design of your game around. Practically all of the game's collectibles are around purely to assist within this combat system. And you will allow the player to simply not engage with that system. Nay, you will reward the player for not engaging with that system. My goal as a player is to find the most efficient way to tackle combat, right? Well, here it is! Running from battles means I save time, allowing me to progress through the games faster, and stickers/cards, allowing me to stockpile attacks for bosses, and or, in Stickerstar's case, have plenty of options for solving overworld puzzles. All of this while defeating enemies, and offering very little in the way of drawbacks. Why would I not do this every single time? Console your GP now and find out if skipping battles is right for you and your family. The Origami King has a very, very different battle system. It does away with many of the issues of the two battle system that it follows on from, but it introduces a delectable array of new issues. The Origami King got rid of disposable attacks, to some extent at least. At all times, you have your standard jump and hammer attacks, so you'll never be wasting attacks if you don't plan out a battle quite right. The game does introduce weapons, which are variations of these base attacks, with the caveat that they have limited uses, meaning there is an element of you needing to strategize when is the best time to use them. You also get to choose which enemies you attack this time around. Ideally, enemies are grouped into either a 2x2 square arrangement or a straight line of 4, and if there are multiple groups of 4 enemies, you can choose which ones you want to attack first. That's about where my praise for this battle system ends. Because this is not the battle system. This is merely an afterthought to the actual combat system, which is, of course, the ring puzzle phase. This is where the bulk of the battles in this game actually take place, moving these fucking rings around to try and get the ideal lineup. If you do manage to get an ideal lineup, you win the battle. Simple as that. Because when you get a perfect lineup, you get a 1.5 times attack boost, and the game gives you exactly as many attack slots as there are groups of 4 enemies. Which more or less means that every enemy can and will be taken out in one attack phase if you line them up perfectly. Meaning the attack phase is not the focus of the battles. The ring puzzle is the part you have to put actual effort into. That's the fight. And as the game's primary means of fighting an enemy... Hold on a second. Ah, yeah, dog shit! Let's assume for a minute that I don't find the ring puzzles tedious and unnecessary and completely arbitrary and immersion breaking and completely fucking unrelated to literally everything else in this game's universe, okay? Let's assume I find them to be a mildly engaging challenge. Even if that is the case, I have no reason to engage with them literally at all. Let's break this down. So, throughout the game you find and save toads, who progressively fill out the battle's audiences. You can pay those toads to add some additional time to the ring phase, or help you solve it. If you spend enough coins, they will outright complete the puzzle for you, granting you access to the easy victory we discussed earlier. So, if a perfect lineup all but guarantees victory, and you can pay to get a perfect lineup, there is no combat system. If you have the funds to, you can buy your way out of every single encounter, and the game makes damn sure you do have the funds. You could always choose to engage in the battle system, maybe because you enjoy puzzling out the ring phase, or because you want to play the game the way it was intended. But again, as a player, I want to find the most efficient way to navigate the game and its encounters, and paying my way out of them is exactly that. right? But what if you run out of coins, or really want to try and ignore the game-breaking button prompt that looms over you every second spent in battle? You'd have to try and get really good at the ring puzzle so that you don't run out of time and can still get a good lineup, right? Wrong! Pressing X during a battle causes Olivia to pop up and give you a hint, and this is the single most broken mechanic in the game. Not because her advice is even remotely helpful, but rather because the countdown timer is frozen when she's giving these hints, and you have a nice clear view of the board. You can sit here for as long as you feel like it, and figure out exactly how to get the enemies where you want them. And then all you have to do is actually do it. And just like that, with these two helpful features, this battle system is completely null and void. The whole thing is just a confused mess of trying to appeal to everyone and yet appealing to no one. In pre-launch interviews, Kensuke Tanabe, lead producer of these three games, said that the ring puzzles were introduced to appease fans of the classic series. They were viewed as a core fan-focused addition to the combat, and the option to pay your way out was deemed as a feature for the casuals. And to a lot of people, this just seems like Tanabe fundamentally deeply misunderstanding what we all enjoyed about the battle systems of 64 and the Thousand Year Door. But I took a much more dim view on this. To me, this battle system genuinely feels like one crafted out of spite. The core fans were criticizing these games to hell and back, and one of the big reasons for this is that we all wanted a traditional, no-nonsense, turn-based battle system. So what did Tanabe decide to do? To appease us core fans? He gave us a turn-based combat system. You know, you turn the board and then you get to battle easier. This is what you wanted, right? You wanted a turn-based battle system, didn't you? Well, there you go! Enjoy! That doesn't seem to me like a genuine attempt to make things right for series fans. That feels like a cynical, calculated misinterpretation of fans' wants, and a deep-rooted stubbornness to not give them what they want. But, at the very least, battles in these games give you something that makes them worth engaging in, right? Well, that's a lovely segue into... The resource economies in these games are fucked. Okay? No point in sugarcoating it. Battles in Sticker Star net you coins. In Color Splash, coins and paint, and in the Origami King, coins and confetti. In all three games, coins largely serve one primary purpose: to assist you in battle. In Sticker Star and Color Splash, you can buy stickers and cards with coins. In the Origami King, you can buy weapons and pay for assistance in battle. They do serve a couple other important purposes throughout these games, but for the most part, this is why you'd want coins. This effectively means that your reward for winning battles is the ability to keep on partaking in battles. If you stop partaking in battles, you'll end up with a lot less coins, which would make it harder to partake in battles. But why would that matter if you're not partaking in... Do you see why this doesn't work? Like, I'm not going crazy here, right? You see why this doesn't work. Hell, in Sticker Star and Color Splash, that's even less of an issue because stickers and cards are absolutely everywhere. And all three games have easy ways to grind for coins that do not involve battling in the slightest. Looking at you, Rochambeau Temples! And in Color Splash and the Origami King, you can get a lot of coins by filling in colorless spots and non-bottomless pits with paint and confetti respectively. But you can get both of those things from winning battles, so that means battles do have something worthwhile to offer, right? Well, it would, if that was the only way to get your hands on those things. In Color Splash, you can hit things like flowers and bushes and trees, and you'll get paint for doing so. A limited amount of paint, sure, but there are a lot of these things scattered throughout the levels. And there are also big blotches of paint that they kind of just put wherever. And in the Origami King, you can hit just about anything in the environment, and they will give you confetti in Definitely! The rate at which confetti is dispersed does slow to a crawl the more you hit something, but it never actually stops. Meaning you could sit and smack the same tree over and over and over again until you had a full bag of confetti, or just run around and hit a few different trees. If anything, this encourages me to explore more of the game's environments rather than getting into battles, because I'll be seeing the cool world design and filling up on important resources. This means that, across all three of these games, battles offer no actual benefit to the player, effectively meaning battles are worthless. And if battles are worthless, then... well... why would I ever willingly partake in a battle? If I find battles completely unenjoyable and they serve literally zero beneficial purpose, why would I deem them a necessary part of the gameplay experience? I wish I didn't feel this way. I really do. I wish I could just let go and try to let myself enjoy the combat in these games. But I can't. I find it so needlessly convoluted and time-consuming for absolutely nothing in return. From a game design standpoint, these games would be functionally almost identical if these battle systems were to be entirely removed. And the most frustrating thing is, it didn't have to be this way. Because you know what? Battles in the 1000-Year Door also give you coins, which are also pretty much only used to assist in battle. But that game also utilized an XP system, and I think that single addition could have fixed these games. But look at that. What got in the way of yet another thing that could have made these games great? Well, if it isn't our old friends, spite and stubbornness. Kensuke Tanabe, once again, in the same interview, said that Paper Mario is and should be seen as an action-adventure game, not an RPG, and that fans who look at Paper Mario as purely an RPG series will not be satisfied with this direction. The basic sentiment was that we need to let go of our want for an RPG and let the games be their own thing, and to some extent, I get that. I can understand wanting to take the series in a new direction and break free of the tropes and trappings of the RPG genre. But they keep putting these shitty turn-based combat systems in their fucking games! Technical difficulties, Rock is pissed. What is an RPG? Like, what defines that genre? It's a role-playing game, right? But every game is a role-playing game. Super Mario World is an RPG game by that definition. You play the role of Mario. So, what tropes are most commonplace in RPGs? Compelling narratives? XP systems, maybe? And of course, the turn-based battle system. To many people, this is what an RPG is. If your game has a turn-based combat system, it is an RPG. If you are trying to make your game not be an RPG, do not put one of the biggest defining characteristics of an RPG into the game that is not supposed to be an RPG! Now look, I'm not Kensuke Tanabe, I'm not Shigeru Miyamoto, I'm not any of the hundreds of decision makers behind these games. I have no authority to claim what this game is and what it is not. But to the average gamer, by proxy of them having a turn-based combat system, these games are RPGs. If you didn't want them to be seen as RPGs, you shouldn't have put the turn-based combat system in them to begin with, alright? Not including an XP system in these games does not feel like a natural step in trying to have these games be seen as action-adventure games. It, once again, seems like a decision made purely out of spite. We aren't going to put in an XP system so that you can call these games RPGs? They're not RPGs, and you should stop thinking of them as such. All that does is hurt the games. To prove how much an XP system would improve these games, let's conduct a little thought experiment relating to the Origami King. Let's imagine that this game has a leveling system, just like the Thousand Year Door, and let's imagine that every time you level up, you can select to increase one of 3 stats. Max HP, max attack power, and max confetti. The first two mean that you are much stronger and more capable in battles, and the latter gives you much more agency in the overworld. Would knowing the battles, though still a bit tedious, could enhance your capabilities in future battles and on the overworld make you feel at least a little bit more incentivized to engage with them? Would knowing that every battle would be making your character stronger in a way that you can see and feel as the game progresses make you want to keep getting into battles and keep getting stronger? Because for me at least, having that system in place would make me way more likely to engage in the combat systems. I'd still have my individual issues with how those battles unfold, but I wouldn't be trying to avoid the mechanic entirely. And the thing is, this idea would work across all 3 of these games, and would utilize systems they already have in place. All of these games have special hearts that increase your HP and attack power. They each have ways to increase your max stickers or paint or confetti, but they're just strewn across the game at seemingly random intervals. Call me a conspiracy theorist all you want, my friends. But does this not seem like a system that was already baked into the core of these games, but was once again removed out of spite? Does it not seem like a natural inclusion that was removed because it's too similar to the original games, and we won't make these games be like the original games, even if they would be indescribably better for it? This isn't about us wanting these games to be like the first 2 games just for the sake of it. It's about us wanting these games to have any sort of functional cohesion. It's about us wanting to have incentive to engage with the systems in place and feel like doing so is justified and worth our time. It's about us wanting to actually enjoy playing these games. But you know what? Even if they were so hell-bent on not having an XP system, all they had to do was actually limit the game's resources. Using Origami King as an example again, you could still incentivize battles perfectly well by having them be the only way to get your hands on confetti. The battles would still annoy me, but I would have a reason to actually engage with them, because I wouldn't have an alternative means by which I can grind confetti that allows me to skip out on battles entirely. And this exact same thing can be applied to Color Splash and its paint. I don't know how to fix Sticker Star though. That game is fucked in more ways than one. Since Paper Mario Sticker Star, it's no longer possible to modify Mario characters or to create original characters that touch on the Mario universe. This is a quote that Tanabe gave in the same interview I've referenced a couple of times throughout this discussion, and to many, this quote embodies the creative issues the series is facing. Because let's be honest, Sticker Star, Color Splash, and the Origami King are all creatively bankrupt. The writing is good, if a little overly cheesy at times. This is too much. It's too much. We have sticker power. Like, fuck off. Shut up. But the legions of bland toads who all look the same, the tired cookie-cutter cast of enemies from the new Super Mario Bros. Games, and the unwavering insistence that characters aren't allowed to have names? It's absurd. It is utterly ridiculous. I really don't want to get too deep into this whole thing, which may surprise you to hear, but the long and short of it is, this is not okay. After Super Paper Mario, there have been strict creative limitations forced upon the developers of these games that govern exactly what is and is not allowed to be in the games. And every single individual time the end product has suffered because of it. We don't know who is setting and enforcing these rules, but they are rules. Not suggestions, but mandates. And the thing is, every game beyond Sticker Star has been getting looser and looser with these restrictions. More stuff has been allowed that wasn't in the last game, which to me shows that whoever is enforcing these rules understands that the games are better when they aren't enforced as strictly. But they still keep enforcing them. Time and time and time again, we see the games bashing their heads against the arbitrary line of creativity that they are not allowed to cross. And it makes these games feel like unfocused messes. Personally, the way the Origami King handles these limitations infuriated me the absolute most. It is the most loose within these limitations, but that almost makes its blunders even more frustrating. Because in Sticker Star, every character was just a toad. They all were devoid of any personality or creativity. Color Splash actually had a somewhat more agreeable balance between generic toads and variations with some level of personality. And the Origami King has a few characters that are almost entirely unique, and hundreds more that are just as one-dimensional as those in Sticker Star. The exceptions in the Origami King were the furthest removed from the limitations out of any characters in these three games. And that just made me look at every other boring, basic bitch that the game was infested with and think, why can't you have even a fraction of the creativity the exceptions have? Why must you be so fucking horrendously nothing? And don't even get me started on the Legion of Stationery. You see, the main bad guy in this game is Ollie, an origami character who turns all of the normal enemies into origami soldiers. This is actually an incredibly cool concept. The divide between the paper people and the origami soldiers actually leads to a very compelling narrative setup. Characters that would ordinarily be bog-standard enemies set their differences aside and join forces with Mario against the Legion of Origami. That is really cool, and they just had to fuck it up. Ollie couldn't be the boss for every area in the game, so instead, he hires the Legion of Stationery, who are literally just office supplies that are big. Remember when Paper Mario bosses were allowed to be cool dragons, or ancient Egyptian Koopa Troopas, or a maniacal, power-hungry jester? Remember when they were allowed to be unique, visually stimulating, and creatively fulfilling? Well, now, they're office supplies, who are only threats because they're office supplies, and can manipulate actual, real-world paper. I've seen people defend this as a creative way to handle bosses because it's Paper Mario. But to me, this is the most generic, immersion-breaking slop to ever have come from the entire Mario franchise. I'm not kidding when I say that I have never hated an antagonistic force more than I hate these fucking pieces of stationery. This is the most creatively bankrupt idea I have ever seen, and I am appalled that this was allowed in an official Mario game. It's disgusting. And the things I hate about it were the only reason they were made in the first place. Them being as immersion-breaking and laughably plain as they are is what ensured they were allowed in the game under the creative limitations that are being forced into these games. But pause. let's quickly take another look at that quote that Tanabe gave. It's no longer possible to modify Mario characters. That would mean that a Goomba, for example, isn't allowed to look any other way than a bog standard Goomba, right? Okay. Then what is this? Or this? Or this? And expanding beyond Goombas, what's this? Or this? Or this? Or this? Or this?
What's this? What's this? I'm sick of all your shit!
My friends, there are so many modified characters in these games. They're all one-off characters, completely and utterly outnumbered by their generic counterparts, but they're still there. They could and were modifying existing Mario characters in a very fucking similar way that the original two games were modifying existing Mario characters, by the way. The only difference here being they decided to only have them appear very, very rarely. Why couldn't every Toad have a slight variation like this? Why couldn't that play into their personality a little bit? And while we're at it, even if we aren't modifying characters, why aren't we using Toadsworth? Or Piandas? Or Nogis? Or Lumas? Or any race of characters that existed outside of New Super Mario Bros. Wii? My friends, the creative limitations may have governed what was deemed too far when it comes to altering or creating new characters, but any and everything beyond that? That was a choice. Populating the games with legions of generic Toads? A choice. Not utilizing iconic pre-existing Mario characters and races? A choice. Having fucking stationary be the primary antagonistic force of your game, a choice. The limitations are very real and very damaging, but they are not the primary source of blame for these games' creative blunders. These games are bland by choice. I think my issues with the creative aspects of these games can be best summed up by Bobby from the Origami King. We were all begging for partners who were actual characters, with names. You know, the bare minimum of what a character is that for some reason we have not been allowed to have in these games. And they made a big deal out of the fact that they finally did it! They gave us Bobby. Except, he's not called Bobby. He's called Bob-omb, because he's a Bob-omb. Olivia mishears him and thinks he's called Bobby, so you can pretend that that's his name, but it's not. His name is Bob-omb. But he's still a unique character because he doesn't have a fuse. Yep, that's unique enough. Job well done. He has some of the best moments in that game, but conceptually, I cannot stand him. He feels like a very calculated slap in the face to fans of the old games.
So, with everything I've just talked about, with the myriad of issues that I have with these games, there's no possible way that I found anything other than frustration when replaying them, right? Look, you know what me asking this question means, and I'm not happy about it either.
Against all odds, despite everything we just discussed, when I replayed these three games, I had so much fun. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't play all the way through any of them, and I still had a lot of frustrations with them, but I also really enjoyed myself. Because the fact is, when you take away the combat systems and creative issues, these are some really good games. Even Sticker Star had its moments. Running around and pulling stickers off of the environments was really fun, and then using them to solve puzzles was a nice bit of innovation. The confetti in the Origami King is so satisfying to throw. The real-time encounters against the paper macho enemies were a blast, and finding all of the Toads all over the place was so much fun. And then Color Splash. I think Color Splash might actually be my favourite of these three games. It had the most consistently enjoyable gameplay loop. I just loved gathering paint and finding all of the paint spots and painting them. It was really engaging to me, and the worlds I was doing this in were so beautiful and well designed. Each of these games look great too. They all fundamentally attempt the same visual style, but they all execute it in such unique and visually distinct ways. Sticker Star looks like a pop-up book, Color Splash looks like a colouring in book, and Origami King looks like a handcrafted paper diorama. Each visual style really works for the games in question, and they all look fantastic. And don't even get me started on the music. These games all have absolutely spectacular soundtracks. I fucking love it when they go. Good shit! Sticker Star's music elicits feelings of an old-timey stage play to me, and that combines really nicely with the audio limitations of the 3DS to give this soundtrack a lot of charm. Color Splash has what I would describe as a movie-level soundtrack in some regards. For cutscenes and the likes, the music can have quite a somber feel to it, which can really enhance the mood that the game is trying to portray. And the game also has a lot of upbeat tunes that fit right in with what we'd expect from a Mario soundtrack. The music has this way of making me really feel something when I listen to it, and I can really commend that. The Origami King might just have my favourite soundtrack of them all though. I think if we were to go track by track, there is a lower number of what I'd consider to be bangers. But when a song in this game is good, it's good. I really like the rock style that a lot of the tracks in this game have, most notably the first iteration of the battle theme. And with the game being themed around origami, the music often sparks imagery of traditional Japanese culture, which I think is a really compelling direction to see the music go in.
There really is a lot to love about these games, and when I try and shut off the critical part of my brain and spend as little time as possible in combat, I am bound to have a fun time with them. They aren't the Paper Mario games that I wish they were, but I think with a bit of time and a bit of grace, I could learn to love these games. Or at the very least tolerate them.
But for the time being, I can close the doors to this chapter of the series on a much more positive note than I opened them on, and look towards the future. With all of the mistakes that these games made, all of the heel-digging insistence that the series would never go back to its roots, all of the fan wars, and all of the mixed reception these games have received, I really have to wonder about the future of this series that I hold so dear. The Thousand Year Door remake communicated pretty clearly to us that Paper Mario is about to change, but after seeing how easily the blunders of these games could have been avoided, should we be confident that the team are able to right their past wrongs and move the series forward in an exciting new direction? Or will they keep making mistakes? Will spite and stubbornness continue to get in the way of what otherwise would be fantastic games? Will Paper Mario ever reach the highs it previously achieved? Paper Mario games tend to release every 4 years, so I guess all we can do is wait. But I hope that the devs are able to learn from these games. I hope that they don't shy away from them, that they keep what was good and what worked, but more importantly, that they address and fix what didn't. I hope that they listen to series fans, and not the results of a Club Nintendo survey that I can and will discuss at length on its own. I hope that they make the Paper Mario game I know they're capable of making. The game they've clearly been wanting to make, but have been unable to because of the laws governing how they can approach the series. Replaying these games has given me a much clearer perspective on this series as a whole, and it's given me more faith than ever that the team will do what's right for the series. What they know we want them to do. Super Paper Mario 2. We are currently in a Mario RPG revival. Paper Mario is carving out a bright future with the Thousand Year Door remake, and Mario and Luigi came swinging back with Brothership, the first original game in that series in over a decade. But we wouldn't be in this blissful new era without one crucial release. In order to pave the way for a new era of Mario RPGs, Nintendo had to go all the way back to the very first one. In 1996, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System was blessed with the release of Super Mario RPG, a fact that would matter to me if I wasn't British. But if I lived in a region that this game did release in, I'd probably have said, whoa. Tubular. Subtitled Legend of the Seven Stars, this game was developed by Square and was conceptualized after Yoshio Hongo and Shigeru Miyamoto of Square and Nintendo respectively had a little chat that went something like, we really want to make an RPG game about Mario. We really want to make an RPG game that people actually want to buy. Do you think they expected Partners in Time to happen because of this? This game was the last Mario title on the SNES, and released to a lot of praise and good reception. It went on to become something of a cult classic, especially with the dawn of internet forums and online discussions. People really began to realise that this game was really something special, not just because it kickstarted Mario's turn-based adventures, but as a game in its own right. But for whatever reason, Nintendo very rarely acknowledged this game after the fact. A couple of characters would make cameos in stuff like the Mario and Luigi games, Gino would receive a Mii Fighter costume in Smash Ultimate, but that was about it. I don't know if it's because there were licensing issues between them and Square, but Nintendo more or less seemed like they wanted to tuck this game under the rug and shoot anyone who dared to speak its name, which made the announcement of a remake in June of 2023 a very welcome surprise. Now that this game is actually available in my neck of the woods, I'm really excited to finally be able to play it and to be able to talk about look at this goofy little guy! Look, there's a big conversation to be had about the impact and significance of this game getting a full-fledged remake, but there's a bigger conversation to be had about this art style. And it's funny, I was very hesitant to accept this makeover with open arms considering some other Nintendo Switch remakes. I wasn't the hugest fan of Link's Awakening style, and I thought Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl looked embarrassingly bad, and fundamentally, this game is trying to pull off a very similar style, so on paper, I should dislike this. Yeah, counterpoint, I want to squish his cheeks. Look at him! He's just a little fella, a small dude. He's so cute and so silly and so very charming to look at. It's a lot easier to swallow here too, because the box art for the original portrayed the characters in this same style. The look of the remake is very faithful to those interpretations of the characters. So I can really appreciate the way this game looks in that regard. This box art fucking sucks though. I understand why it is the way it is. It's a direct remake of the Japanese box art, but it's so boring to look at and doesn't really show off the personality of this game very well in my opinion. The story of Super Mario RPG goes thusly. It's a normal Wednesday in the Mushroom Kingdom. The monarch is in captivity, Mario's the only one who gives a shit, same old story. A giant sword named Exor drops by for a chat, and in the process he tears through the Star Road and sends Mario, Peach, and Bowser flying to different ends of the Mushroom Kingdom. Exor destroys the bridge to Bowser's castle, and the Smithy Gang invade the entirety of the Mushroom Kingdom with the goal of total world domination. And this kickstarts our adventure. Mario has to travel across the lands to collect the 7 star pieces that broke off from Star Road, and rid the world of the Smithy Gang once and for all. And along our journey, we meet Cloud. Cloud. One of the things people love most about Super Mario RPG is its characters, and I can't say that I blame them. This game is home to a whole host of weird and wonderful critters, each of whom are interesting in their own unique ways. The standouts here are naturally the party members who accompany you throughout the entire game, and these guys are all a treat. This game is the first time we ever saw Mario team up with not only Princess Peach, who's been upgraded from the role of damsel in distress, but also Bowser, who works with us in this game instead of against us. Well, kind of. I love the dynamic going on between Mario and Bowser here, as while Bowser is on our team, he's still in a constant bout of one-upsmanship with the plumber that opens the doors for a lot of comedic moments, something this game particularly shines in, but we'll touch on that in due time. This game also introduces completely original characters to our party, namely Mallow, the son of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man who's somehow been convinced he's a frog, and Geno, an actual god. There's no joke here. Geno is a literal deity. No wonder he never made it into Smash. Each of the main characters go through their own little arcs throughout the game, and I found the stories of Geno and Mallow to be particularly interesting. It's probably shiny new toy syndrome. I've seen so many stories with Mario and Bowser and Peach that it was probably just nice to see other characters' stories play out. But I don't know, man. Geno's story is interesting to me because he isn't even Geno. That's just the name of the doll he possesses to become his earthly avatar. The actual Geno, or Hot Music, is a star who came down to the Mushroom Kingdom to try and help restore the Star Road. I think Mallow's story had the biggest impact on me though. He's a cloud who got separated from his parents as a child and was taken in by Froggigus, who we meet early in the game. Froggigus adopted, raised, and loved Mallow, and Mallow came to know Froggigus as his grandpa. But he eventually finds out that he isn't related to him at all. This saddens Mallow, but he and Froggigus still have an irreplaceable bond, which I think is really sweet. We find out later in the game that Mallow is actually a monarch of Nimbus Land, and he is reunited with his parents. Nimbus Land is just one of the notable locations in this game, and there are plenty of others that we become acquainted with throughout our playtime. I'm not going to go into detail on any specific one, but each of these locations have their own local history and primary race of inhabitants, as well as their own zany one-off characters who stand in the way of Mario's path for one reason or another. This game's locales and characters all have such a charm to them. They're all really well designed and thought out, and the execution of each and every one of them lands really well, making them all memorable to the player in their own unique ways. Okay, I've gone long enough not talking about it. This game's soundtrack is fucking phenomenal. It's just banger after banger after banger, whether you're playing the original or the remake with the original soundtrack selected, which, by the way, should be a feature in every remake ever, forever, ever. It might be already, I don't fucking... Seriously though, both versions of this game's soundtrack are incredible. I love the style of the original SNES tunes, as that sound profile just has a lot of charm to it in my opinion. And it's by far the go-to version of a lot of the game's songs, including, but not limited to, that one Mario RPG song that everybody talks about. So you don't need me to. Fuck it, I just need to... The remastered soundtrack is worth a listen to, though. I think a lot of people kind of felt that this grand orchestral style doesn't really fit the game or its music, and if you're one of the people that feels that way, you're wrong. This soundtrack is glorious! From the curiosity the map theme invokes, to the groovy, jazzy style of the Rosetown theme, to the sheer coolness of some of the stronger enemy battle themes that just gets me going rah! The remake soundtrack in particular has such a way of injecting very strong feelings within me. It makes this adventure feel so much more grand and impactful, and that really works for me. There are a lot of songs that really work to enhance the comedy of this game too, such as Booster's theme, and yeah, we might as well talk about it now. This game is really fucking funny. A lot of this comes down to the writing, which is just sublime, and manages to strike a really great balance between having jokes flying out at a near constant rate, and ramping that down to let the more serious or emotional moments have some room to breathe. The game is silly, but it also has a lot of heart. For me, the biggest contributor to the comedy, though, is the ways in which the characters move about. See, this is actually another way in which, going by other Nintendo Switch remakes, I should dislike this game. The characters all move on the exact same grid they did in the Super Nintendo version, snapping between 8 directions and following set blocky paths in their movements. But where I found this to be clunky in Link's Awakening, or downright lazy in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, I found this to be really funny here. I think that's mostly for 2 reasons. Number 1, there are fully, gorgeously animated cutscenes that supplement these moments, and add a bit of weight to some of the game's more important sequences. And number 2, this is used very intentionally in this game. It's hard to describe exactly what I mean by this, but look at Pokemon for a second, where the characters slowly walk along their set paths, slowly do their walking animation as they turn, that sort of thing. Now look at Mario RPG, where the characters are snapping between different positions and paths pretty quickly, and they don't hang on any pose or movement for too long. That, to me, is the core difference here. Mario RPG's movements aren't stilted or awkward, they're quick, they're snappy, and therefore, they're very, very funny to me. Now, the world and style of this game are one thing, but the ways in which you interact with that world are really what I wanted to focus on when playing this game. Because you can be as charming as you want, but if your gameplay bores me to tears, there won't be a second date. As the name would suggest, Super Mario RPG is, well, an RPG, so the primary gameplay loop consists of turn-based combat. Each of the characters have their standard attacks, but they all also have special attacks that require certain amounts of flower points to perform. The roster of available special attacks can be increased as the game progresses by leveling each of the characters up, and the special attacks really lean into the characters' personalities. A good example of this is Princess Peach. At this point in the Mario canon, she didn't exactly have a great deal of combat experience, so her special attacks lean much more into regenerating health and boosting stats, essentially making her the healer of the group, which contrasts nicely against Bowser's special attacks that tend to be these big, extravagant affairs that tend to damage multiple enemies at a time. There are also different weapons you can unlock and equip interchangeably throughout the game, and while I expected them to just be simple stat boosters, they actually change each character's base attacks. They obviously grant more powerful attacks as the game goes on, but the weapons also change the attack animations, which has a pretty significant impact on my single favorite thing about combat in this game.
The action command!
They're so fucking good. They're so fucking good! Action commands are what really sets Mario RPG apart from any other RPG I've played, with the possible exception of every other Mario RPG. Basically, as you launch an attack, there are button prompts that, if timed successfully, help improve your attacks. A well-timed action command can increase damage output by up to 2 times, and every single move in the game has its own action commands for you to learn to master. This really adds to the moment-to-moment gameplay, as it makes the combat a lot more involved than simply selecting an attack and watching it play out. You have to be aware of what the action commands for each of the attacks you perform are, and then time them as close to perfectly as you can manage. It's a really engaging system, and made me feel more accomplished after winning a battle than any ordinary RPG. It made me really feel like I had earned the victory because I had pulled off my action commands particularly well in that fight. There are also action commands to be performed on enemy attacks, and pulling them off allows you to block some or all of the damage you would have taken, depending on how well you time out the attack. Which honestly fixes my biggest problem with RPG gameplay. I'm no longer completely useless during enemy attack phases. New to the remake, successfully pulling off multiple action commands in a row starts off a chain. The more successful action commands you land, the higher your chain gets, and a higher chain leads to a lot of benefits. Depending on who's in your party, a higher action gauge will offer certain buffs in combat, and while these buffs can be a bit subtle, they can also really help to turn the tides of battle in your favour. The primary benefit, in my opinion though, is filling up the action gauge, another new feature in the remake. Chaining action commands is the only way to fill this meter, and once you've managed to fill it completely, you're able to pull off triple moves, a devastating but gloriously animated team attack that has the potential to deal massive amounts of damage to your enemies. These things are spectacular and are often quite overpowered, but the coolest thing about them to me is the fact that there are unique moves for every single party member combination. Not only does this mean there are 6 total triple moves, which is just cool, it also adds, buzzword time, depth and strategy to the gameplay, as you have to evaluate whether the triple move for your current party lineup is the best play or not, and potentially spend a turn switching out party members in order to have access to the best attack for your current situation. This whole system is only awesome to me. But I am aware that this gameplay addition did contribute to what many would consider this game's biggest issue: the difficulty. Especially with the remake, a lot of people found this game to be a little bit too easy. A bit too baby's first RPG for their taste. But as the baby, I thought this fucking ruled! I am not good at RPGs, okay? I couldn't get my head around Octopath Traveler's combat, and I put the game down after finding myself completely unable to get past a boss fight, but it's fine, I'm over it. So where a lot of people might have found this game to be a bit too easy, I found the difficulty to be absolutely perfect. Because it wasn't so easy that I could just breeze through it without much effort. No, there was still a lot of difficult encounters. But instead of becoming frustrated when I inevitably fell in combat, I felt confident in the fact that I would get through this because the game was equipping me to do so perfectly. And I think this was massively helped for me by the fact that I have never enjoyed turn-based combat as much as I did in this game. I don't know why, but this game in particular got me hooked on its battle system. I absolutely loved fighting in this game. Something about the sound design, the action commands, the different abilities of all of my party members, the chain system and action gauge, and the wide variety of enemies to encounter left me ravenous for more. I genuinely found myself searching every single area from top to bottom to make sure that I had found every enemy because I just found combat that damn enjoyable. I did this for most of the game, and after a while, I really started to realize, god damn, this game is fucking fantastic. I know calling this the best Mario RPG is quite the bold claim, but I don't know, man. The level of enjoyment I got from this game was pretty fucking high, pretty damn consistently throughout the entirety of this game. And while this is the case for a lot of other Mario RPGs, God, I don't know, this game just has something about it. It's fucking really frustrating how much I struggle to put it into words. But there's just a feel to this game that screams peak. Like, I think I preferred Thousand Year Door to this game, but when you're looking at Mario RPGs, I feel like this game perfectly matches that descriptor. It's exactly everything you'd want out of a game called, well, Super Mario RPG. It plays it a lot more safe than the Thousand Year Door, but it's got a hell of a lot more style and substance than the likes of Sticker Star. It strikes a perfect middle ground of being wacky and creative, but still meeting the expectations that its name sets. So while it may not be my favourite Mario RPG, I honestly think that this game could be the best Mario RPG. And I really wish that it had a different name, because saying that Super Mario RPG is the best Mario RPG is... it's stupid!